Hey, welcome to On the Chain Roundtable. This is Jeff here with co-host Chip, sitting over here. And with us today, we have a great guest. We have GDLT. What's up, man?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me on here.
And we're doing
Yeah.
fantastic. And so today we are going to talk about how all of us have converted to become Bitcoin maxis. No,
Mhm.
yeah, right? No, yeah,
No,
yes, that's
Exactly.
too
It's
exactly
a
early
what
big
we're
for
going
it.
to talk
announcement for
about.
all of you.
I was trying to hold back on that one, sorry, and let that slip. We're going to get into what's going on in the market in general. There's a lot going on, a lot of great things. And one of the things that GDLT brought up is the fact that Chris Larson has just paid for a slew of cameras to watch your every move if you live in San Francisco. And we're going to get into all that right now.
And now, the roundtable with Jeff and Chip on the chain.
Where'd you guys get
And
that
Hey,
are
song,
back.
man?
boom.
That's a
How awesome
rocking
is
song.
that?
Welcome, G. It's so good to have you on the roundtable, man. And for people out there that don't know, you're an OG. You've been doing this. When did you first start your channel? Because if you guys don't know, G has his own YouTube channel. It's solid stuff. Does live streams. It's really good. And you guys can click on the link below and to see more information to go ahead and follow him.
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me on. Once again, you guys are awesome. And I know you guys have been around in this space for a long time too. And just love seeing what you guys are doing with your channel and just the people you keep bringing on here. Just great quality content all the time on both channels. You got the XRP Minute on some of them going, or Chip with the XRP Minute and, doing his thing there
It's
too.
longer than a minute. That was a bad choice, G. It sounded like a good idea at the time. Like, what am I going to name this? I'll name it the minute. And people are like, and then it turned into an hour when I would do the live
Yeah.
streams. And they're like, I don't know what I was inspired to name it. It was supposed to be a brief, like a brief couple of minutes, but it's not even the XRP minutes. It's just the minute. I try to move away from that, and people are like, "Where's the XRP minute? How come there's XRP minutes not happening?" But getting back to you, I mean, one of the
Yeah,
cool
yeah,
things is like I remember, early in this, this whole community when it started evolving, you were one of the originals out there, and we used to go hang out. We go watch another streamer. I remember back in the day, CKJ. Then a lot of people would go hang out in your streams, and it was great because we didn't know what you looked like. All we saw was like somewhere in LA. It was like the sunset, or it was a picture of something. And what really you kind of brought together was community. We have a lot of people in there, early days in 2017, 2018 as we were rolling into it. And there was a lot of people. We could go in there, we could talk and chat, and it was like the first time of hanging out with the community in a live stream to be able to do that. But then YouTube changed their sort of terms, and then they like, oh, you can't live stream anymore.
right. No, yeah. So I started streaming in like early 2018, just right after the Great FOMO in 2017, and I noticed a lot of people's sentiments started going down. You started seeing some other XRP YouTubers that weren't streaming as much, and just the sentiment was getting really low around that time because we saw it just take a nosedive down in terms of prices. So I started streaming. Yeah, it was bad, man. That was a tough thing to witness, especially since I was just getting into the space and being more active in it. I was in since like 2000, like late 2016, 2017, but I got really into
Wow.
crypto near the end of 2017. I wish I would have listened to my friends a little bit more in 2016 and been more avid about the research that I'd done. But that's in the past. So started streaming in 2018. Wanted to just talk to the XRP community in particular because I just started getting really into XRP, seeing the amazing gains that it had in 2017, and just seeing the type of quality type of people in the community. Very, I was thinking very logical, and I started getting into that thing of like I think regulations are going to be playing a really big part in this space in the future. We're in like a wild west phase. Bitcoin's about circumventing governments, circumventing banks, all that Ripple jargon and stuff. And I really just got into XRP from there. And so I wanted to do live streams, talk to the community, And that's really what it's always been about on my channels. At least when I do live streams, it's like about talking to, now it's all the communities. That's my thing, is just all the communities. I
Right.
just like talking to everybody in crypto and just trying to get more and more educated about it. But I still love
So
XRP.
When did
so
you change your name then? You went from
I went to
GXRP to GDLT.
Yeah, exactly. I went to GDLT, I think almost like half a year ago now. I think it's been 6 months since I've been GDLT. I jumped over to GDLT. I love XRP. It's still my number one in my portfolio, but I've expanded. At that time, I was all in XRP. And who knows, maybe I'm going to regret that decision and maybe still should be all in XRP. But through doing all the research that I've done with XRP and Ripple, you start seeing other connections to other blockchains. I don't know, like you have Stellar. Ethereum is going to be interoperable with XRP as well, and Ripple. So now I'm just more interested in finding what's going to be part of this internet of value of blockchains, this interoperable world of blockchains that we're going to be going into. And there's definitely going to be other winners in this space. But I definitely think XRP is going to be the bridge to a lot of it, without a doubt.
yeah, especially since you know what we started seeing the differentiation about really use case, because everything was like, yeah,
Exactly.
let's roll a crypto out, because you look at all the projects out there and they
Yeah.
don't have there's just nothing there, and artificial pump and dumps, and but you started
Yeah.
seeing things like VeChain coming out, that had a use case, and other people trying to solve similar type of problems, Chainlink. There's all these sort of other things, Hashdara,
Hedera Hashgraph. Yeah.
Hedera, Hashgraph, those guys. Next time you're thinking about something to name something, how about have it pronounceable? I'm just gonna say that right off the bat. I'm like, I can never say that right, so I always fumble on that. I'm like, okay, that rolls right off your tongue. I mean, yeah, you can't forget it, but
Well, here's
No,
here's the big
I'm.
one though. Here's the
Oh,
big one. Question wise, what do you think? So some of these projects are popping out of China.
right.
Whereas then you see, VeChain, for instance, started, I believe, in China, but now it's in Singapore.
Right.
Sunny
And then
Lou.
we've seen more and more of those. Yeah, we've seen Binance started in China, and now it's migrated elsewhere. The list kind of BitTrue, same thing, I believe, started in China and then migrated elsewhere.
I
On and on. What do you guys think of that?
I think early on in my channel, I was very much anti-China, like very anti-China investing in anything that came from China. I think I've opened up a little bit more to it just because I feel like the world that we're going into is very unpredictable and kind of unforeseeable. And I wouldn't be surprised if somehow it became more global, right? It's a globalization type of period we're going into, transformation here, where we could see maybe companies coming out from China that, we thought, oh, it's a China thing, so it'll be a scam, most likely. VeChain, I'm having a more and more hard time thinking that it is a scam or is going to be heavily manipulated by China. But yeah, definitely with other coins, I'm still kind of iffy to touch on. But VeChain, I've been a little bit more open towards considering, I don't know if Sunny Lu said the partnership with Ripple thing to just kind of maybe scam XRP community members to look into the coin a little bit more, because
Hmm.
it's kind of hard to interpret. I love the enthusiasm. I don't know if you guys saw that interview with DAI that Sunny Lu
Yeah.
had, but he was bringing up, oh yeah, we like Ethereum because thanks to Ethereum we got to become the company that we wanted to become, and then the second coin we like is XRP, and maybe we could be partners with Ripple. Oh yeah, we've talked. I know friends who talk to Ripple people. I'm like, is he trying to take advantage of the third most and obviously the biggest community in the space,
Yes.
bar none, and doing the most steps towards mass adoption? So yeah, it's things like that that do keep me iffy from looking into coins from China, and that's why like my main holdings are XRP and XLM, just because I know those have very very strong connections and are definitely within the U.S. and the United States and are trying to play ball with regulators, right?
Yeah, also too, I think VeChain too, I see the problem they're trying to it's so funny that they came out of China, right? Because
Right.
where is most of the abuse with like knockoffs and not authentic stuff, and being able
Exactly.
to track that,
Exactly.
right? But if you look deep enough, IBM's done a lot of this with supply chain and also tracking authenticity. And I look at their use case, and it's a good use case. I'm not going to say that. It's great that they're building partnerships because aside
Right.
from what we see with XRP, you see VeChain a lot of really interesting partnerships with well-known companies. You ever go to one of these other ones? They go, we're partnered with so and so and so and so. You're like, dude, I've never heard of. Who are those people? It's like you don't
Yeah.
even know who they are. But these are like BMW. It's like these are Walmart out of China.
Yeah.
But it's funny that out of all of the stuff that they're doing, this is a real easy, I look at something where the payment space, and the vertical, if you look at what's come out recently, and I think Crypto Eddie touched on it, which was the first vertical was the cross-border payment, but XRP is a lot bigger and a lot broader of what it can actually do. And I look at VeChain, it's like, I like their use case, I like the growth. I do like Sonny Liu a lot. I think he's a very inspirational sort of a leader. You need that sort of, much in the way that Brad Garlinghouse. He gets an interview and you're just like, man, this guy's amazing,
Yeah.
with Julia Chatterley the other day, and he's just like bam, bam, bam. He nails everything. But I kind of, myself, I look at where can you get VeChain? What exchanges are they on?
Right.
Where do they exist? And so that part of it for me is like, I have my
Liquidity.
Right. I have my chosen sort of exchanges, and I'm like, okay, some of these aren't available there. I'm like, why aren't they? Now I can understand you're not going to see it necessarily on Coinbase, although Coinbase came out recently and said, oh, we might add 30. Okay.
I mean, I I think some of the interesting things too with with the investment in like when you're talking about they have a pretty good use case. This is my thing every time since I first started. Like my biggest jump into the crypto space was into XRP because I started researching and you just keep seeing that there was always something to dig further into. When it came to Ripple or XRP, there was just always some other stone that you can turn over and be like, whoa, that's another partnership right there. Oh, that's another connection to the SEC or the Fed or whatnot, right? And I still can't find that really with a lot of other coins in this space. But one of the things that's always stuck out to me through the research is that you have to master payments first when it comes to cryptography or cryptocurrency or whatever. You have to master that aspect of payments first before you can do smart contracts, maybe do supply chain tracking and stuff like that. And I go like, where's VeChain? Like, what's their transactions per second? Those type of things. Well, here comes the moment where I gotta step away for just a second, you
No
guys. But
worries.
All right. Yeah.
We'll
We'll bring
continue
you back.
on. Bring him back, man. So, Jeff,
Bring them back at some point.
at some point, right
Point.
before
Some
the end of
point
the
in the
show,
future. Some
in the
point.
future.
And so now that he's gone, let's really talk about this China thing.
Let's jump in. I mean, I think everybody who watches this channel kind of knows, where you and I sit on this thing, Jeff. I mean, we kind of, come down. I think more from the geopolitical side of things, and we see what's happening on a global scale. There's been a lot of missteps, in my opinion, of what China's done that have hurt not just the U.S. I mean, the U.S. Let's take the U.S. out of the equation, but it's been a lot of other countries, and now we're seeing migration start to happen. Due to the tariffs, a lot of the U.S. companies pulled out, and they started relocating around, other parts of Asia. And then we saw this other, there he is, he's back.
Oh,
So
there he is.
yeah, so we saw we saw this other stuff about, with regard to China, and then you see in India becoming a big player. I know you talked about it on our channel yesterday. You guys haven't seen that video, you should check it out on our other channel, which is in the description below. But Jeff, I mean,
It's on this channel.
is it on this channel? That's right. You did
Yeah.
live stream it. Sorry.
Yeah, I live
My
streamed it.
bad. I can't keep track of it where we put all this stuff.
Yeah,
But it's
but to your point, I think there's a ton going on over globally. I think one of the points I bring up with China is you see a lot of these projects that are growing over there. I think they understand in order for them to get international traction, they need to leave China. Because there's this growing sentiment. I think across the board, and there's more and more concern coming out, and it's
yeah,
hard to really determine which companies within China are then going to be implementing any kind of back end spy initiative or some sort of a centralized control mechanism. The one thing that we do know is when a company in China gets to a certain size, the government steps in and
yeah,
takes a certain part of that company as especially being a member or having a seat on the board. where they do begin to have a little bit of direction. So, so I'm thinking, and this is something we all have to really consider: is it true? Is it not true? And I'm thinking about it more from a perspective: how does it then impact our investment possibilities? With so if you see like DJI, the drone manufacturer, there was a lot of concern that there was a lot of back end software hidden to where they could manipulate and utilize the camera and spy with the drones. And then you see DJI donated, a huge volume of these, a huge quantity of these to police departments around the United States. So you see it from that perspective. Then Hawaii, their phone manufacturing, same thing. But then you think about it from a blockchain perspective, super easy to manipulate and hide,
Yeah.
and have a hidden agenda. So what does that mean? I mean, is that, and I think about it, there's other goods that are coming out of the other country where there could be, but it's crazy that we even have to think about that, right? That there could
Right.
be a hidden agenda from the communist government to spy on the activities of other countries, and TikTok, spying on the activities of Americans. I mean, it's
Right.
crazy to even think about having those kind of conversations.
I I agree with you, and I mean it's warranted though, right? Because that is happening in our world today, and that's what we're seeing. And I mean, it doesn't also help. Like we talk about, taking it towards another subject as well, is like we talk about going back to a gold standard when it comes to these digital currencies a lot. And it's like, oh, is it going to be XRP? Is it going to be this one? Is it going to be that one? Are they going to be pegged to gold eventually? And remember, China has the most gold in the whole world right now. They have the most reserves of gold
Is
in
it real?
I
in
don't
the
think so, man.
You don't
I
think
have
so?
no. I don't absolutely do not think so at all. I do not think they
Okay.
do. I think
They've
Okay.
there's
been They have been
first
accumulating.
first of all
Okay. Okay. But
first of all the Philippines has probably the most. You'd be shocked to hear that it's a real deep rabbit hole thing, but there is a
yeah.
lot of stuff sitting there
Okay.
from a past time. I don't but I don't know. Should we believe anything? That's the thing. Do we believe it?
I prefer
Well,
seashells.
that's the thing too, and living in this era of like, and especially with what we're living in right now in this kind of era, is like we're so online where we have access to all this information, but yet it's information from like so many sources, and which one's the real source? Who can you actually believe? Who can you not? So then you end up having to make your own decisions, and sometimes, like me, just making a statement right there, gold, or China having the most gold, and then now you have like some disagreements or whatnot. But
Now we have to debate it.
no, exactly. So I'm not going to put my foot down and saying yeah they for sure have it, but they have been accumulating, and these central banks, all across the world have been accumulating more and more gold. So it's going to be interesting to see what global regulation will follow if this gold is going to be pegged to a digital currency of some sort that can be sent instantly all over the world. And it's
So the
it's hard to
Well,
imagine.
tokenization of gold investments or gold holdings,
Mm-hmm.
a representation thereof, easier to tokenize potentially, especially. So let's say you took a Bitcoin instead of the digital yuan, which is could potentially be fictitious, but let's talk about so the Bitcoin, let's say and I talked about this a bit yesterday, but you know so all digital assets have their own use case, right? And as we
not
see,
all.
like, well, possibly, I don't know, but they're growing to identify into certain use. So initially, with Bitcoin, oh, it's gonna replace banks. It's gonna be our currency of transaction. Blah blah.
Right.
It goes on and on. So then, as time kind of progresses, you realize that the time of movement is too slow. The cost of movement is too high. Even with the implementation of new technologies, it's still not getting that type of an adoption because maybe it wasn't really meant for that. I don't know. Maybe as they start breaking it down into satoshis, maybe it could be different. But for the time being, there's more of a global identifier with Bitcoin as the store of value. Right.
Right.
So, and that's where that becomes. So maybe things, and here's a thought where, yesterday I kind of brought up is where, you start that identifier. Is it that wrong then that we have a separation of these other digital currency values from Bitcoin, or does Bitcoin become, the base trade, value or valuation process of all the other altcoins? similar to the way we use a US dollar right now. We're going to value every other currency to the US dollar as an
Right.
example.
Keep
What do you
printing
guys
it.
think of that?
I mean, I certainly don't think Bitcoin is going to be the future of, for global payments whatsoever, unless technology just happens to evolve where it makes the mining process speed up and all Bitcoin gets mined right away. And, they don't have to worry about the mining process and the energy consumption. Doesn't look like that's going to be happening anytime soon. I feel bad every time I see new people on Twitter coming in and saying, "Hey, just bought some Bitcoin, bought my financial freedom, bought this." And I was like, "Oh, well, welcome to the space."
Yeah,
you know, you,
that's a good one.
you're gonna be going all around with Bitcoin, and then you're gonna be seeing all these talks about it uses too much energy, it's slow transaction times, and I think a lot of people still, guys, we've been around here for like 3 years, right, saying this type of jargon that it takes up too much energy, it's slow, it's not going to be something that industries are going to want to use. And also with its original intention of trying to circumvent banks, circumvent regulations. Now what I find funny is like we've been in the XRP community and we saw this kind of coming a long time ago, but now you're starting to see all these other companies that want to talk, they're saying the words digital assets, trying to be have a good AML program, have a good KYC program, work with regulators. I remember when I came into the space, it wasn't about that at all. It was XRP is a banker's coin. They want to work with regulations. Screw that. We're trying to decentralize and trying to break off from all that stuff. And now you're just seeing like the crypto space really wants the institutions to jump in and bring in that big money, but yet
Exactly, man.
you're fighting.
I think
against
you want a balance, right? So I think what we're seeing is you have these Bitcoin maxis that are still holding on to the anarchy type view of
right,
of completely separating outside of society, meaning you can get rid of a whole subset. I don't know necessarily refer to as anarchy society, but it's
right.
a pure decentralized economy, which you still need even in every scenario. It's kind of like a pure democracy. A pure
Mm,
democracy is never going to work
never.
because eventually you're going to have mob rule. Let me see. Oh, so but in that scenario, with a completely decentralized environment where you don't necessarily have a third party, let's call it oversight, or a third party protective measure,
Hmm.
you still need some semblance of that, at least in today's day and age. Maybe
Yeah,
we'll get to some point, then they'll want to put it with AI overseeing, but it doesn't fully, work, in that full decentralized space because people still need to transact. We still need
right.
to, so if I'm going to buy your house and you're going to sell me your house, I'm going to give you Bitcoin. You still need a third party that's going to hold the Bitcoin until we complete our transaction, or you're going to sell me goods. I'm going to buy the goods. I just don't need somewhere safe to put my digital asset.
Yeah, you're bringing
Hence,
up good intro to privacy coins, right? So that's the whole
Yeah,
nother big sort of thing about the transaction, right? What's going to
yeah.
happen with privacy coins out there? Moneros and
I mean, from what I'm hearing about Monero, it's probably the truest of the privacy coins that are out there. I've had
Elixir's pretty
some.
strong though. Elixir's a pretty
Oh yeah,
strong contender, yeah.
I'm looking forward to that one. I don't know. Have you guys been able, like, is it out yet to buy? I don't think
It
so yet,
is,
right?
but unfortunately, it's one of these things where you're not supposed to be able to buy it if you're outside the U.S. They had their initial
Of
token
course.
sale type of thing, but a lot of, you can
I
do it if you want, right?
outside the US or inside the US?
I
Inside the U.S. you can't, but you can get it outside the U.S. type of thing. But
There's an
um
issue with that, right?
what one of the things I just wanted to kind of draw back with Bitcoin there too is like you guys know this, Stefan Thomas and David Schwartz, who are part of the Ripple team, used to be early developers on Bitcoin, and Warren Paul Anderson. All these guys were super early developer Bitcoiners, super Bitcoin maxis. Stefan Thomas released a Bitcoin video that got millions of views, basically started this whole thing of people getting infatuated with investing in Bitcoin. So in realization, the two big or three biggest Bitcoin maxis that I would know of that I actually would call Bitcoin maxis, David Schwartz and Stefan Thomas, saw Bitcoin as a dead end and they left. They left to go work on the XRP ledger,
They saw
right?
other projects. I'm sure they still
Right.
have holdings.
of course,
No,
They
I'm
didn't
sure.
leave. So
Yeah, I mean, they have holdings in Ethereum too. You can hear David Schwartz saying, "Yeah, I still got a lot of Ethereum that he's selling every now and again and whatnot."
and
But
Bitcoin.
And Bitcoins, yeah.
He-
And these guys like tore Bitcoin apart and rebuilt it from, so it's not even Satoshi's Bitcoin that we're seeing. We're seeing what Stefan Thomas and David Schwartz tried to do to make mining more efficient, and then just realized this is too much like a headache. It's like trying to repair a plane that's already in mid-flight.
Well, that's what most companies are doing. They're building the plane as they're flying it, and that's how a lot of startups work. It's like, I'm part of a startup now. We're 5 years in, but it's like, hey,
Right.
we always say that we're building the plane as we're flying it. And I want to bring you back to we talked a
Oh
little
yeah.
bit about gold pairings and stuff like that. So
Right.
some news kind of hit this week. Judy Shelton, who famously came out and said, was all about the gold standard. Now on July 21st. The Senate is gonna look at confirming her, and you see, like, if you read an article about it, it's like controversial, financial advisor in economist and blah blah blah. But I mean, really, how really outside the box is that when we talk about, it's only been since 1973 in the U.S. since we abandoned the gold standard. It's not like she's like some controversial figure that's saying we'll
Yeah.
eliminate all fiat currency and we don't even know what we're going to go to. But I think this is a real positive sign when you start seeing this kind of movement into the Fed of somebody that has really grounded principles and not
Right.
let's keep printing and let's keep going crazy.
I I mean, I personally think the printing is just part of the plan. It's going to be going to a point where the masses, like, that's what I always think it is when the masses demand for the change, that's when the change actually happens. Right now, we're just still going through, oh, we hate the Fed for printing money, but it's going to continue. And then you're going to just, that's where you're going to see the masses go, okay, we definitely need some sort of hard asset, some hard, like, sort of value to be pegged to. And that's the gold standard, right? As Judy Shelton would say, it's like back to the future type of
Right.
thing. And I could see that. I totally do see something like that happening. And that's where Chris Larson's idea of fiat becoming stronger due to digitization. Because if we go back to a gold standard, then these fiat currencies will be pegged to that value of a gold standard as well, and they'll be digitized. So then it'll make those more appealing options versus right now everybody just hates fiat, hates US dollar, hates their respective countries,
Yeah, they
currency.
hate it. Everybody hates it, right? Everyone's like, I can't wait to get away from it. But look at the folks, look at some of the countries out there that have tried to
Right.
unpair from the petrodollar. It's
Right.
like, okay, so the reason you see so many people coming back is because there is still the strength there, right? You still look at the pairings against everything else that's out there, and you look at, unfortunately, even if you move away from it at some point, people think that, okay, well, if you don't have the dependency on the petrodollar anymore, we're going to break this chain. But guess what? Whether it's a digital asset, whether it's a currency, whatever it is, what are you going to look to the rock, right? There has to be something. So maybe there's multiple ones. We've heard so much about China coming out, with but we know it's going to be a closed blockchain. It's going to be completely, controlled. And so I don't see anything outside of China where it's going to be adopted. But there's been a ton of people, even Ashish Burla, coming out and talking about, from Ripple, coming out and talking about this big move and it's going to be this and that. I don't see it because I see the world has been turned off. There's too many things that have occurred with China where now you start
Right.
seeing India going to be the benefactor.
Yeah.
The USMCA, this new trade deal that eliminated NAFTA. We now have the North America becoming a powerhouse. We have manufacturing coming
Right.
back here where in Mexico, and I don't know if you saw recently, the Mexico president was at the White House. He was making an announcement. He was just saying, I'm really happy that we were included in this and that because now you know
Hmm.
what's going to happen to Mexico's economy? Build up Mexico's economy. Instead of having people come to the US, build up Mexico, have them be a powerhouse, have Canada, and so that we become North American powerhouse, not the US, but the
That's
US,
brilliant.
Mexico, and Canada. And now the way that that's structured, which is so different than NAFTA, and I don't think people realize how big of a deal this is
Yeah.
that you're going to have people relocating to India out of China. They're going to relocate to other parts, of Asia, including India, but maybe there's some other ones. The Philippines, a lot of people have gone to, or they'll come back home and they'll have elements of it in Mexico, in Canada, in the U.S. Because I love the
Right.
fact that there's a minimum $12 an hour that has to be paid as part of this. So when you look at that, you're
Huge.
like, okay, it's very different than what was part of NAFTA, which was paying the workers nothing, giving them nothing, no sort of
Right.
benefits, and they're working like
Horrible.
almost like slaves, right? Robots.
That's it.
Right.
That's exactly right, Chip. But you bring up such an amazing point because too many people are. Gee, you brought up earlier. There's a lot of new investors in this space. What we see on the streets right now. Also, there's a lot of new people that are also just learning about politics. And when you're new and you've never followed it before, there's a lot of new people that are learning about history. They're just
Yeah.
not learning the right history. But when you're new and it's just awakening, then you're only getting the headlines of what you're seeing today. But and it's coming from an area of passion and emotion, like you said. People are just new in the investment space. XRP pumps 5%, Bitcoin goes down 5%. Oh my God, I can't believe it's like every
Yeah.
day is a moment of rage. And this is we're in a weird period of time right now where we have access to every amount of data possible in front of us, and yet people aren't tapping into it. They're just looking at their Twitter feed. They're looking at their
Right.
Instagram. They're looking at
Right.
their whatevergram, and it's mind numbing to the point that there's so much that's going on and has gone on for decades that has
Right.
led up to this moment today. Not just these little snapshots and snapshots and snapshots. And when you pull it all together, then they're all components of themselves, So what's going on, like what we're talking about right now, is really going to be impactful on our growth economically. So when we look at Chip is mentioning, bringing jobs to Mexico. If you
Yep.
bring jobs to Mexico, you solve a lot of problems. If you bring
Yep.
jobs to Mexico with an actual salary, that is measurable to what it would be, or comparable to what it could potentially be in the U.S., you're going to
Right.
boost these people's lives, beyond, imagining. If you go to a place like India and you have people that are earning as a college graduated engineer earning about $200 a month, or $300 a month. If you can get a full time driver that drives you around for $100 a month, in India, imagine if you could, what the impact is going to be when you bring manufacturing to a country like that. Imagine the wealth that's going to be generated and created that China squandered, and the reason why it's been squandered is because of bad political decisions that were made by other countries and bad companies, like Apple and all the others. I'm not going to single them out, but they're one of the biggest
Oh,
culprits. Chip, they're one of the biggest
dude,
You
culprits
can't talk
because
with Apple with Chip, man.
dude,
they
don't
they
start ratting on Apple right now, man.
but
It's
they
not.
have all their factories over there, and people are paying thousands of dollars for their products, and yet the products that are made over in China, you
Because they're
have
superior.
labor that is, they're paying them pennies on the dollar. It's not just Apple, but that's one of the big U.S.
Right.
companies, and so everything is just not in balance, and so what the crypto space is bringing to all of this, a little bit like I talked about yesterday, like in Africa and South America and elsewhere, is you're giving opportunities to people in these developing countries. We shouldn't, there's people in the political echelon that look down on other countries because they haven't developed yet. But yet there's a lot of ingenuity and a lot of highly, intelligent people and capable people that don't want their handouts. They want an opportunity to build and create. And that's why so many people come to the United States. But if we open up these opportunities to the world, imagine what they can do in these. Imagine what they can do in India. Imagine what they can do in Africa.
Exactly.
Now you open up the blockchain and it changes the whole dynamics. You open up the digital asset and it changes the dynamics from a banking perspective, right?
Oh yeah,
And
and
it's
you bring in
amazing.
and you bring in more financial inclusion, right? The whole banking the unbanked scenario here, and that's where when we talk about globalization, that's you got the upholds of the world, you got XRP. Well, who knows if XRP will be this like global international currency, but it does seem like one of these digital assets in this space is being set up to be so liquid all over the world that no matter where you go to, that type of currency will be accepted, and you can the merchants can decide to receive whatever they want to receive. They can decide to receive their local CBDC, for example, or whatever around that time. But yeah, right now we're seeing those steps where countries like Africa, countries like South America, going through tough times, but we've heard from the G20 with their global agenda, they want to abolish. I don't know if they're going to do it fully, but they definitely want poverty levels to go down significantly lower,
Mm.
leading to 2035. And so right now we're just seeing the beginning stages of it. But I agree with you, Jeff. Like, imagine once we do get this financial inclusion for these countries underway, what type of innovations are they going to spur out? Even technological innovations, because so far, and I don't know, I'm sure you guys know of Greg Kidd. I talk about him a great deal too on my channel, and he talks about technological innovations in the future. Right now, it's coming out of Silicon Valley. It comes out of concentrated areas, China or freaking the U.S. in Silicon Valley. He's saying in the future you're going to be having maybe Europe or Africa or South America start to bring out these new technological type of innovations that can change the world because of financial inclusion,
But it's
because being able to participate in the a global economy.
And it's all set up really. I mean, a lot of what's holding that back, I think Jeff touched on it beautifully, is the fact that, unfortunately, if you're doing a lot of traveling around the world. Jeff's pretty well traveled. I've
Mhm.
somewhat traveled and been to different continents. And, one of the things I always see is that, you talk to somebody, and as long as you just talk to them as a person, right? It's like human to human. Forget about that. Forget about being French or Filipino or Japanese. You just talk as people, and you realize, you know what? We are so similar. And then you realize that the governments, maybe aren't friendly, but the governments hold people back. And if you look at what's really transpired in Africa for the most of it, aside from South Africa, is you look at it's all been thumbed down on the government's just holding the people back. And I think Jeff makes a really good point. It's like and the G20, they'll look to change that. That's what I love about digital assets and the whole idea and the promise. The promise of Bitcoin was exciting because the promise of Bitcoin brought this whole echelon of, I mean, you think about the whole thing about the altcoin, altcoins are not Bitcoin. Like that's like the king and everything else is just, part of the, the whatever, the gallery, if you will. And I look at the idea, the promise of Bitcoin is that, hey, okay, so it doesn't have to be a payment rail, but you certainly could, if I say like, oh, I have enough Bitcoin right now, I want to go buy my Tesla, and I want to find a way to be able to buy that with Bitcoin. You can. You don't have to worry if it takes, a couple hours to do the transaction. It doesn't matter. But when you start
Right.
getting into buying common goods, I always love this one. It's like, oh, with XRP, I can use this card and I can use my crypto. It's like, I'm not doing that now. I'm not. I'm kind of in the hodl space right now where I've not sold. The only thing I ever sold was I sold XLM, cleared most of it out, and I moved a lot of it in XRP because at one point I still hold XLM because I still
Yeah.
do believe that it does have. I worry a little bit about who's running the show over there. But I
Right.
also see there's a lot of great projects. Almost you don't even see. You really got to dig for XLM news sometimes because
Exactly.
do you know what I mean? It's like you have
It's over there
you have
building.
they're building, but Stellar is doing some good stuff. I mean, and you look at what they're doing as a company, but I think they're doing a
Well,
lot more behind the scenes.
that's the interesting, just a little tidbit on, like, because Stellar has the Stellar Foundation, right, which is this nonprofit type of thing, and a lot of people, when they try to go to finding out what's going on with XLM, they go towards Stellar Foundation, and they feel like, well, we're not really seeing anything like really spurring out of there the way we see, for example, with Ripple. And that's where I think like companies like Stripe and IBM are really the big, you know, people who are really running the XLM blockchain and doing the most on the XLM blockchain. And I think that's what XLM or Lumens is trying to do, is trying to make it seem like, hey, we don't have this one central like type of thing that's like the Stellar Foundation's not controlling everything that's going on with XLM. It's open source. Anybody can jump in, any companies can jump in and use the XLM blockchain. And so, they had that like release of the top 30 companies. I forgot, was it like on Bloomberg or something like that, or Forbes' top 30? And we saw like, you see Ripple there at number 18, but number one was Stripe. And from what we know is that Stripe is using XLM Stellar blockchain technology, right? But nobody really talks about that. So that's where I think Stellar is a pretty interesting investment, because they do so much on the hush hush, and it's hard to keep track of what's going on with that
Yeah,
project. But
exactly.
Yeah,
And
and right
Stripe,
now they're in the building stage, right? So they're
yeah,
building the layers, and the one thing that we always look back on is utility.
right,
So RippleNet, awesome, limited
exactly.
utility. It just isn't there yet. Stellar, like what you're talking about, awesome.
Mhm.
Limited utility of XLM, almost non-existent.
Yeah, yeah,
But the rails aren't in place. Just like Chip was saying, who's going to want to use it yet? I mean,
right.
it's like I don't want to
There we go.
transact in it
Backing up.
yet. I mean, I get it. Once the payment rails come into place, you also need a little bit of stability. But if you have instant transaction settlements, then it doesn't matter what you could have wide swings, but instant. Then you don't have big wide swings in seconds. Your wide swings
Exactly.
could be in days. But so if you lock in your transaction today and it goes through it, everybody's happy, and it transacts back to, like you were saying earlier, into your native currency, which is something I believe. I don't believe in a global currency. I believe
Right,
in global acceptance, but I don't believe in global currency because
right,
but you do need to have some. I've been in countries where they're not allowed to accept US dollars as a currency. They're not allowed to hold US dollars as a currency. Makes it real difficult. And so they have a lot of limitation because their indigenous currency not so stable. Not such a good place to put your money. But that's in a lot of countries around the world. So they don't necessarily want to hold their money in their native currency. The governments that be, you're not going to convince governments otherwise. I want to be able to hold them in a foreign currency in a regular bank. Come into like an uphold. This is where a stable coin, a digital stable coin, maybe a couple globally recognized stable coins becomes significant, where that becomes a holding place. You
right.
can hold your value in this stable coin that might be tied to a basket of goods. If you think about this whole concept of the SDR and the ESDR, the concept is interesting, where it's based off of a group of coins, of currencies,
Currency.
and it creates an exchange rate. So now, as you have the
Exactly.
fluctuations, you get moderate changes within it, and so it creates a little more stability in the valuation. Um, but if you created something similar to that from a global perspective, if you do want to reach out and help, um, but still, who's going to control that? It's going to have to be a private initiative. I mean, there's so I'm just thinking like kind of crazy, but that's what's required. And so many of these countries, their native currencies. Look at Venezuela; their currency's trash. I mean,
Mm,
it has
yeah,
zero value, nothing. I mean, it's
right.
insane. But that's because the government destroyed their economy.
Exactly.
India, their currency, the valuation has wide fluctuations against the US dollar or against the euro. That makes it hard to transact. China manipulates the fluctuation of their currency when it suits them. They drop the valuation when it then, or they'll raise it, based on what
Right.
their needs are, artificially. I mean, what do you think of that?
No, yeah, and I that's why we need that thing of like that one. A lot of people are saying gold, right? That's why we need that one center of value that can be globally accepted, like you were just bringing, that everybody knows to peg their currencies to. So we don't have this like. I hope the future isn't still going to be competitive currencies. I hope that can like kind of be just at a level playing field per se. No competitions amongst countries trying to devaluate the currency to, you know, like you said, bringing up what's drawing a blank here of you know, having certain currencies devalued against another one, and then the exchange
Yep.
rates are kind of off and whatnot. Um, I think what Chip was bringing up is like he has this holder mindset for holding his cryptocurrencies and not really using them yet, and that the future will probably be using some sort of stable coins. I'm with him in that boat too. I have an uphold card and I've used it a few times. It does work perfectly, but at the same time, every time I'm using it and I'm using my XLM or XRP to make a payment with it, I automatically feel like, man, there's thousands of other people that are probably doing the same thing, and that's thousands of more people who bought those two pizzas with Bitcoin, for example. Like all of us, it is fun using the cryptocurrencies to buy these things, but at the same time you're also going like, damn, what if it shoots up in the next hour, or if it shoots up in the next like day? The evolution of the space is going to take a good long time, because I think eventually these currencies like XRP or Stellar or Ethereum are going to have to be stable in the future at some point. There can't be this amount of volatility happening for these coins in the future if they look to be, a stable use for payments or stable store of value. For example, I don't even think Bitcoin's a store of value, even though people call it a store of value, because they think the uptrend is just going to continue going up and up for Bitcoin. But as we talked about earlier with this technological deficiencies and who knows what the future, it being the majority of the hash rate over in China. And that's a funny thing too, is like not only these countries competing with their individual currencies, they're competing with these technological currencies like these blockchain technology type of things. Cause I definitely think China has a hand in manipulating what's going on with Bitcoin and it rising
Hmm.
up and then going down. I think that's another way of these competitive currencies they're going on. Also Ethereum, majority of the hash rate over there in China as well. So, it's
But
got a long way.
but you had mentioned something about, you had mentioned the level of the playing field. I kind
Right.
of, I sometimes cringe when I hear that, only because I know level of
Yeah.
the playing field, has multiple connotations. Like, so when people say, what does it really mean to level the playing field? Well, give everyone a fair option and shot at it, but it also has a negative connotation with regard to socialism, because that was the whole idea of what was just like level everything to everyone's the same,
Right.
unto their abilities, that they can sort of, you know, contribute in a sense. So when I hear that all the time, it's like, oh my God, the words, there they are. It's a level the playing
Yeah.
field. But it's a broad statement. It's like when you think about level the playing field, okay, yeah, and what you were touching on is really key, because the point of what you were just like, what I took away from what you were saying is that the whole idea of manipulation of devaluing a currency and being able to manipulate it to some point. And you're right. I mean, I don't think Satoshi thought that at some point, well, most of the mining would be controlled out of one entity, where we see it happening in
Exactly.
China, right? And so
Exactly.
we don't really know. Think about this. Do we know there's 21 million total? We know it's going to be 16 or 17 million when it's all said and done. But do we
Right.
know if 5 or 6 or 11 million of that is in China right now? Do we know that we say, well, they're stocking up on gold. Are they
Right.
stocked up on Bitcoin?
Right.
Have they gone in on Bitcoin? Does anybody know where this is really centrally located? What if they own 5 to 10 million Bitcoin? Then what? Well, what if
Hmm.
they own 12 million? Right? I'm not saying they
Right.
do. I'm just saying that the control, because of the scarcity, where when you look at Stellar, they burned 50%. They start out with the same 100 billion, and they go like, you know what? Let's just burn half of the supply.
Yeah.
Well, okay. But see, when I see moves like that, okay, I can see where they make sense in the scarcity. Okay, it's become a little more scarce by the tune of 50 billion, right? But when you start seeing moves like that, you're like, whoa, whoa, hey, it was cool when you started it, but now you're burning 50. Like, what other crazy town are you going to go to do
Yeah.
some other big move? And I'm like, what? Yeah, it basically displaces any faith that I have when you just go like, you know what? Here's the burn 50 billion tokens, and we just
And
did
what
it.
and what's so crazy is Stellar did that, and they're literally the only blockchain that I know of that can get away with doing something like that, and then even still garner more interest into its crypto, because they burned the 50 million and then or 50 billion, and then they said, oh, we're going from inflationary to deflationary. And that's such a controversial topic, but it brought so much more interest to Stellar for I don't know
But
what reason really,
look at Jeb. Jeb said, originally their whole thing was, the reason that, from what I heard, the initial arguments and the reason he left Ripple was because they were going institutional, and he always was the mindset of bringing it more to the consumer, right? So
Yeah,
they
right.
kind of separated on that. Like, they were more, Ripple was institutional and banks, and he was more the mindset of the original Bitcoin, being a founding member of Mt. Gox, really wanting to move it more to the consumer.
Yeah.
But then what happens? He comes out in an interview for that last conference and says, I would like to see the CBDCs using, and it's like, wait a minute. So wait a minute. So now you left Ripple to create Stellar,
Right.
the Lumen, Stellar Lumen, right? And now you want to go back to institutional with CBDCs and using your tech. It's like it starts, I go like, I don't know. That's weird, right?
I almost feel bringing up again that you're not really seeing news coming from Stellar Foundation, but you'll hear news coming out from IBM and Stripe and whatnot about XLM. I think part of it is like even Ripple somehow phased out Jed McCaleb. I think that's what's happening. What you're seeing here with IBM, they're like, okay, thanks for giving us this great technology, Stellar Foundation. This, it's the same type of consensus algorithm that XRP is using. This is great. Thanks for giving it to us. We're going to use it in our Hyperledger consortium along with Linux and all these other. Great suite of blockchains that are going to be part of that consortium there. And then they just keep phasing out Jed McCaleb some more and more. They get him from CEO to CTO, and it looks like his involvement as CTO is like getting limited as well.
Well, they see it as a growth in that space as the corporates are going to do what the corporates do, and
Right.
they're going to do what's in their interest,
Exactly.
and I have to believe members of the board said, hey, you know what, this guy just isn't the right
He's
guy.
not an idea. He's not an idea guy. He's good at bringing the talented people together and having the connections, but it just doesn't seem like he's
Not
got
a
the idea.
visionary, really. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly. I mean, good for it. Kudos to him for saying, "Hey, I need to bring these Bitcoin developers like David Schwartz and Stefan
Yep.
Thomas, who I think Stefan Thomas was a prodigy. The guy had a business at age 14, and now he's like what in his mid 20s, late 20s or something, running a Coil. The guy is a visionary in my eyes. But
yeah.
kudos to Jed McCaleb for recognizing that talent and saying, "Hey, come on over." Arthur Britos and stuff like that. Come on over. Let's create this consensus algorithm. Let's, get rid of the whole proof of work type of idea of having to mine and energy consumption. But that's basically all that Jed McCaleb really offered at the end of the day. And he still owns a lot of XRP. So that's where I think, too, if XRP happens to shoot up, he has a billion of them or so, right? Or millions of them at least. He'll probably use that to help boost the XLM, not the price, but expand the XLM ecosystem as well. I would imagine.
Yeah, but
Least.
he's selling a lot of them. So is he funding
Yeah.
lifestyle,
Yeah.
funding everything else? And I understand. Look, it would.
Oh, I
It,
see. I see what you're saying.
it might appear odd if you're the founder of Stellar and you have your own Lumens token, and then you say like, but then you're holding your other bags from your previous
Yeah, from
company.
your
People will be like,
ex-girlfriend.
wait a minute, but by the same token, it's like you're going ahead and you're cashing all these in and you're using that and you're moving all that. So I mean, a lot of that could help fund your current project. So I kind of feel like he's kind of caught in the middle. People are like, well, if he ever believed in it, why would he be selling it? Because look, if you're selling it at 20, 21 cents, whatever, when it's gone as low as 17, 16 and hit 11, and he's selling these off, he gets, because every day he can move so much and sell them. You're like, dude, I mean, just like give it a year. This thing's going to double in value at some point, triple, quadruple, and your holdings go up. But it almost doesn't matter. I mean, he's caught in a weird position of if he does it, if he keeps it, and who knows? I mean, we see him selling a lot, but you almost can't function that way. People are going to call you either way.
Yeah, and Jed McCaleb must have just a ton of cryptos. He must have more than just XRP.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
if the guy is so early in the space, he probably has a ton of Bitcoins, a ton of Ethereums. The guy's probably just kind of sitting on a fat
And
wad
do
of
you care at
cash.
that point, G? Do you care when you got some more money than God? You're like, what is my motivation today? What do I want to do? You can do
Exactly.
and have anything, right? I mean, that's where we all sort of aspire to get to, is the freedom that he actually has and has been given to him, and like Kid too is the other one who didn't he have a billion? He was gifted, wasn't he part of a billion XRP as well? Do I have that right?
Yeah, no, well,
Was that?
yeah, we heard in DAI's interview with Greg Kidd, he said he owns about
Oh.
1% of the total supply of XRP. That's a billion XRP. That's a lot, man. That's
A
nuts.
billion XRP when
I mean,
it
these
goes to a
guys are worth
dollar.
a shit ton. Yeah, these guys
Yeah,
are worth a shit ton of money
yeah,
already.
exactly.
And
Greg Kidd already has a ton of money from his
it's
investments in Square, Robinhood, freaking
amazing.
Twitter.
Oh yeah,
Oh, man.
and these guys are just sitting on the bags, and for them now it's just about building projects. It's like
Yeah,
and I think you get to a point when you're in that space though. Also, it becomes like Elon Musk. Does he care so much about the money aspect of it, or
right,
because he's already made it, or does he care more now about his legacy? What is he
right,
going to do? So Elon Musk is like, look at all the stuff he's into. Now it's, he's into space. He wants to do the boring, he's got this one, he's got that one. And that's what all these guys are doing. I mean, it's like,
right.
who's the Virgin Atlantic guy? What's his name? Same thing, I mean, and then all these guys, I mean, that's what it's
I
all
mean,
about. They're putting their mark on the world.
no, yeah, and I got two things. One quick one with
Richard
Tesla
Branson.
Richard Branson, that's it.
that one quick thing with Elon Musk. I like the guy personally. I think he's a visionary. I just think sometimes he's like, I want to be the first one to get us to Mars, right? Like he's talking about trying to colonize on Mars, trying to send all these things to Mars and whatnot. And I'm like, man, we can barely figure out our crap here. Can you use your resources, all these tremendous resources that you want to use to colonize on Mars? Can we actually use that
Right.
to like get world peace first and then
Can we
think
go
about
back to the
going?
moon first?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Something
That's
like,
I think that's it.
Or
no mouses on the rocket, please. No mice on the rocket.
no,
But the
that's not a
second
mouse,
thing,
by the way.
too,
It's an air bubble of gas and other things. But
But
exactly.
that would have been a massive sized mouse.
Yeah,
Considering the
right.
exactly.
size of those engines,
On
everyone's
the
like, "Look at that
rocket
mouse!"
side.
Like, what is that? That mouse must have been like this
Yeah, if it
massive, like,
were, unless it was a tiny model, Jeff. You see, that's the whole thing. If it
oh
was a
yeah,
model,
yeah.
then it would be a normal
Right.
sized mouse, right? So, but you're kind of right
Or
about.
it
So
might have
he
still been a
just
giant mouse, a tiny model, big mouse. I don't know.
and they have so that's like the whole new thing.
Right.
There's giant mice in space, but he just passed Warren Buffett on the Forbes billionaire
Yeah.
list. But again, a lot of this stuff is like, I think if you had to look at somebody who's a little bit more liquid, I think we would
Right.
probably think that Buffett is probably more liquid guy that could liquidate a little bit, versus. But I love a
Right.
guy like Elon Musk. The reason I love the guy so much is because he gives zero Fs about
Yep.
anything. He's
Exactly.
out there. He's like, I'm gonna get fined when I tweet this out by the SEC, and I give zero.
Yep.
I love a guy that does that, that just bucks the
Very bold.
system. He's just
Mhm.
a bold dude, and it's like I
And he's
like
got
a
the
guy
money to
like
do it.
that.
Dude, I love Tesla without a doubt. I look forward to what the growth for that company is going to be like. But another subject that with Greg Kidd owning 1 billion XRP, I've noticed that the whole problem with blockchain a lot of the time is these identity solutions as well. Not only governance, but you have identity solutions that still haven't been figured out in terms of blockchain or these cryptos. And you see him coming out, Greg Kidd. He point that out as like a possible flaw for Ripple and the XRPL. And then next thing you know, you see all these identity solutions coming up, especially from his side of the court where he was the chief technology risk officer or chief risk officer for Ripple, and he was telling him, hey, you should get involved with regulators and whatnot. Now he's telling him you should get involved in the identity space. You have these developments of global ID. I don't know if you've heard, guys have heard of global ID, but they're also part of the Pay ID, Open Payments Coalition as well. And that's his company that he's a part of, and I think it's part of that. Why it's part of PID is starting to bring that digital identity solution to blockchain. And I think that's going to play a really big role for the XRP ledger and what it'll really help to differentiate itself from these other blockchains, especially the ones that are just science projects and scams. I mean, of course, it's going to blow that one away. But having identity solutions for payments and knowing the person that you're sending information to or your payments to is the actual person. It's not just an address or anything like that. I think that's going to be playing a crucial role. And interesting to see Greg Kidd still somewhat involved with Ripple, even though he's not in their company anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think too is like the XRP ledger. It's like 1,500 transactions per second sounds
Yeah.
good, but let's face it, it's gonna need a major overhaul and upgrade. You're looking at Visa, they're doing 80,000 a second. It's just one of the payment rail.
That's what I'm confused with XRPL too. A lot of the time, I hear all these different transactions per second numbers coming from everywhere. You hear with ILP, the Interledger Protocol, which apparently its payment connectors are set up in a certain way where they use XRP just naturally as like a native asset. And you see things like Stefan Thomas saying, yeah, being able to do trillions of transactions per second.
Streaming though, but that's the difference. Like if you're streaming
Oh,
under
okay,
the
I get
streaming
you. I get you.
protocol, like on
Like
Coil
over
where it's
Coil.
constantly streaming small amounts over a period of time,
Okay,
you
I
could
got
really
you. I got
you could scale it big, but you can't with the actual transactions where you're sending a transaction. That's only 1,500. You're like, guys, I
Okay,
mean,
okay.
But that's also the whole point of when Ripple with their technology, their big focus, their primary focus was large institutions.
Right.
Large financial institutions. So how many transactions do you really need, per second? When you're doing these large you don't have. But when you get down to retail, and that's the purpose of a Visa, now all of a sudden you just had to scale it, to the how many trillion of people, or billions of people do we have, in the world? Is it
And
7 billion or whatever?
and
A lot of
according
scale.
Yeah, exactly. And with the transactions per second point, like a lot, this is still the argument that I hear from BTC maxis when it comes to Bitcoin, is that it's the most secure, right? Even though it's definitely susceptible to rollbacks, 51% attack, what have you. But that's always their argument, is that it's a secure system. No matter what, yeah, sure, the transaction is going to take a long time to go through, but it'll always go through, right? It has that type of security aspect. And I think with XRP, given that we've heard 5,000 transactions per second or 1,500 transactions per second, who knows what the real number is? But hopefully, these institutions or these banks that are investing in it are seeing security, right? Obviously, the time is going to be the time to send the transactions is going to be very fast. So that's already taken care of. Now, do they have the security where they could put their trust into a ledger like this, a global shared ledger, joining a Ripple net and whatnot?
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
Visa. We saw Visa recently. They had some. Someone had pointed out one of the trades last week where there was an article in New Zealand looking for somebody who's familiar with blockchain, a blockchain developer, but also familiar with Ripple and a couple other, the Interledger and some other things. And then I went digging, and I wanted to do a video on it originally, but I started digging around. I started seeing 5, 10, 15 of very similar language, and other ones. There was like Austin, Texas was one, and it was also in California, but they had these all over the world that had the
Right.
same snippet of stuff. But I couldn't ultimately draw a parallel into saying, okay, so because you're familiar with the payments and Ripple and this and that, doesn't necessarily mean anything. It's just they're talking about, it doesn't mean they're going to use the ILP.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything. It's like it's just a lot of speculation. It is like I could have put out a video that said, guys, look at this and look at this thing and look at this and then
I know, right?
check it out, and it's like, so what? At the end of the day, it's like, unless I spent about a couple hours just researching it, but could never draw the real parallel into, yeah, because you're familiar with the protocol or a transaction that's out there, doesn't mean anything. It's just like,
Right.
okay, we want you to know about it. We want you to be in the
Right.
know.
And that's the thing that we go back to earlier, is that there's a lot of new investors in these space that see news like that, or they see, oh, somebody talked about this company or talked about the XRP ledger, that must mean they're thinking about using it, or are gonna, like, people jump to too many assumptions too quickly. And it goes back to, there's a lot of new investors every single day. There's new investors coming into the space. I mean, there's a one person I follow, Miss Teen Crypto. She's one of the newest, like, to the crypto community. I don't know if you guys have heard of her, but she just goes, "Oh, I bought my first BTC. Can't wait for my
Yeah.
financial freedom," and stuff like that. And I said this earlier before, but I was like, "Hey, welcome to the space, but you're in for a ride when it comes to digital assets, because you actually do have to know what your money is going into. You got to do the research and try to find really quality products. And who knows, some of us are invested in XRP and we think that's the most quality project out of this whole space, but it's still a toss up, right? It's still a toss up. Like, you have XRP community members that dig so deep to say, oh yeah, Trump is going to eventually say the words XRP is our is our currency and whatnot. The Marvin Gayes of the world, the Ripple Riddlers, the BG123s and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's still a toss up. It's still speculation. It's not for certain
Right.
whether that's going to even happen, if there is even going to be an adoption of this digital asset space. Sure, we have backed Fidelity Investments, these institutions that are really talking about accepting blockchain technology, but it's still no guarantee. It's
Yeah.
it's
Well
still
said,
something
man.
that they're just looking into.
Well said. That
Yeah.
was very well said,
Awesome.
man.
That was a good wrap up too.
Was a
We
good
are
wrap up. And this is the quickest hour in crypto right here, man, on the chain, the round
Appreciate you
table.
guys having me on. It was a lot of fun talking with you guys.
Yeah, it was fun having you, man. It was good to have you. And thank you for being such a also big supporter of the channel. I just want to say
Of
one last
course.
thing. Look, please go follow GDT. He's right down there in the description. But go follow him. He's put out good information. It's a good place to go hang out on his live streams, and it's good, valuable stuff. It's somebody that I enjoy watching, in the space, and it's always cool to have somebody on that, we also like to look at and follow too. And I think that, a lot of people who may or may not be familiar with you, go
Yeah, man.
give a follow.
yeah.
And I just want to say thanks I mean, you guys as well. Just thanks to everybody who's supported the channel thus far. It's been, 3 years in the making, and still trying to figure out my way of, what do I like. I changed so many corners in that in that channel, but I just appreciate your guys' support.
But you
so much.
deserve to have 10 times the subs you have. I really believe that. I mean, it's like, especially since I was an early follower, one of probably your early couple hundred subs, maybe 150 or something. I was early there, but you deserve it, man. You really deserve everything that comes to you because you put a lot of work into it. And I love, your opinion on stuff too. It's always good to hear.
Thank you, guys.
So,
That was outstanding. Great conversation.
yeah, awesome,
man.
Jeff.
So that's
Excellent.
it, guys. Listen, please like and subscribe down below. If you made it this far, thank you, one follower. We love you so much. No, thank you to everybody who comes in here and makes On the Chain what it is today. It's because of your involvement. It's because of who you are. It's because of you coming in and sharing your ideas, not only on the videos, but commenting, cross board. But that's what really makes everything great. It's one of the really just love you and really appreciate you being here and making the contribution and being some of the smartest people in crypto. So that's all I have, Jeff.
That's it. That's awesome. So with that, again, same thing. I want to say the same thing. Appreciate everybody. We're out.
Are you down with OTC? Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when the next video drops.